Of course, it's all about color mixing here, so I'm going to need to set up my palette. To do that, I'm going to grab one of these plastic sheets. I'm not going to put paint directly on that, so instead I'm going to use palette paper, folding it over the edge, flipping it over, and then taping it so that it fall off on me. This is very sharp here. I only need 2 pieces of tape. I don't need long pieces. Boom. Now here's my palette. This is where I'm going to be mixing my color. Don't forget your paper towel. Your paper towel is your best friend. It helps you with so many things while you're painting. So when I grab my palette paper, I should be grabbing a placemat too. I have so many varieties of color here. You can see that there is a spoon in each cup so that these paints don't get mixed. I want to choose the colors that I know I'm going to be mixing. Notice how I put my palette right on top of all the other paints so that my white is not dripping into the other colors as I bring my spoon across the paint. Purple's really drippy. What I do with the liquidy stuff is I just kind of scrape it on the edge so it's not dripping anymore, but I'm keeping my palette above the other colors. I don't need every single color on here. I already have those in front of me. Instead, I'm only putting the colors I plan on mixing. I want to make light purple, so I have white and purple on here. I like to keep my cool colors next to each other and my warm colors across on the other side, because when you mix warm with cool, it makes brown or gray. It makes a neutral color. In the past, we've used brushes to mix color, scooping and mixing it right with a brush, which you can do, but you're going to have to clean your brush out a whole lot more. So that's where palette knives come in. The palette knife is for scraping. It's not sharp. It's not a knife for cutting. It mixes the paint and makes it easier to clean up. Scoop up some of the white, not all of the white, because I want to use this with some of my other paints. And then what I'm doing is just using the edge of the palette knife to push it over. I'm not digging with the palette knife. I'm not using the tip of it. So I'm scraping it across to keep it in a pile so that it's not all spread out on my palette paper. Do you see how I scraped it into a pile here to work with? Now I'm done mixing that color, so here's where my best friend comes in. You can see I've already used it several times. Fold my paper over a pinch and it cleans off really quickly. My paper towel, I usually just fold it over so that all the wet paint is inside, but I can still use this. You know, I mentioned how teal and orange will make a brownish color. They're opposites on the color wheel. Blue and orange are opposites. Teal is just one step away from blue, so you can see they're directly across from each other. When you mix opposites, you can see here you're going to make a gray or a brownish color. Let's say I want to keep this nice color I mixed. I can scrape up some of it and start it in a new area. So I'm just going to mix a little of the teal in because it's a lot darker and the orange is very bright. You can see it's starting to make kind of a grayish green. Right? So that's actually a really nice natural looking color. Neutral colors you find in nature and in the earth and in animals. So this is a really nice natural green, kind of a mossy green I might find on a mountain somewhere. If I add a little more orange in, it's going to make a brown. The browns we have here, these don't look as natural as something like this. So if I'm making a painting of the earth or of animals, mixing my own neutral really will make it more interesting. I'm not going to take my palette knife and scoop it right up. This is not a spoon, all right? So keep this just for scraping the paint. So I'm going to scoop a little yellow in. Do you see how I kept my spoon over my palette the whole time? Now, I don't want to just spend 40 minutes mixing color because this paint dries fast, and also we don't have a lot of time in art class, so mix as you need the color. If I am wanting just to use one color and not mix it, I don't have to put my paint on the palette. I can dip it right into the color I want. Just be careful that your brush is clean before you move on to the next color. So when I paint with my brush, I try not to get the paint on the metal part because once it's on the metal part, it gets really messy. So I try to keep it so I'm just dipping just the bristles in my paint. Swirl it on the bottom of the container. Really feel the bristles being rubbed by the bottom. You don't wash shampoo out of your hair just by dipping your head in water. You have to use your fingers to get it out. So same with this brush. To clean its hair, I need to actually touch the bottom of the water bowl. I'm not going to just swirl it around like this. And then swipe it and dab it on your paper towel. You can see I still have some paint on there. That's because some got on the metal part. So I'm going to do it again. I should never hear this noise because that's getting water or paint everywhere. So again, swirl, swipe, dab on your paper towel. Color. Now this is a really light neon yellow. On top of this dark background, you're not really going to see it. If you want a color to be light and bright like the paint is, you need to have white behind it. So painting on white paper, I want to find a color in between this one and that one. So I'm going to do that right on my palette. When you mix color, just remember the darker colors are much more powerful than the lighter ones. So if I mix too much of this teal in with the yellow, it's just going to still look teal. And now that I have this in between color, I can kind of fill in my space here. Overlapping is going slightly over the other color. You can see that I'm working with wet paint still, so it's actually starting to blend on its own when I overlap like that. And now I have a nice fade from one into the other. I'm going to paint this part white first so you can see the difference of how much brighter the yellow looks. Tempera paint still dries fast, so if I mix a little bit of color on this, like that's going to dry in about 10 minutes. So I want to use the paint that I mix as I go and not spend time mixing all these colors and then start painting, because all those colors will be dry by the time you get to the painting part. So mix the colors as you need it. Paint is dry. If you're ever trying to keep a color neon, do it on white. Whether your paper is white or if you painted the area white first and let it dry, it's the only way for this neon to stay looking bright. So if I put a different color on top of this, I can scrape down and see the color underneath. I can use the scraping tool to create really cool texture in my paintings. Use a card to scrape on paint too. And scrape something on thin and it creates a way different texture and pattern than it would if I used a paintbrush. Now I'm creating a circular motion when I scrape, and I'm repeating that over and over again to create this pattern happening on my sketchbook. Those scraping tools should go in the brush bath when you're done, or wipe them off clean with a wet wipe. When I am done with my palette, I'm going to take it over to the trash can. I'm going to flip it carefully, take the tape off, fold the paint onto itself so it's not going to get on my hands. This is clean and dry. This goes back in the blue bin where I got it from. My water container, I can dump at any empty side of the sink, back on the counter. If I have paint on my hands, which I do, I have some green on my fingers, I don't need to wash my hands, especially during cleanup time. We don't have the time. That's where these boxes come in. Wet wipes, I just need one to get my fingers. And I don't need to worry too much about making it perfect. Just get off the wet stuff, wipe your table down. Always recommend to go get a placemat. Think ahead. If I'm wiping down paint on the table during cleanup, I keep flipping my paper towel over or folding it so that I'm not smudging the paint around, but instead I'm picking it up. This gets recycled. The dirty one doesn't go back in the box.